Hello and welcome to the More to Life podcast. I am your host, Elle Mace, and I am joined today by my dear friend, Steph Morris. Yay!
Hello.
Steph is actually my first ever podcast guest. So what I am just going to drop in is I also still haven't figured out how to edit these podcasts. So Steph, no pressure, but we cannot make any mistakes whatsoever.
It's all good. We're authentic. We don't need to have editing. It's all good.
Yeah, this is the real raw deal here. So I'm super excited to have you on because a lot of what you do is really, really connected to what I do in terms of, when I work with people with their relationship to food and their body, obviously their intimacy part and the sex part is so crucial. So I'm going to pass it over to you to introduce yourself, tell us why you do what you do, and then we will dive in.
Amazing. Thanks for having me. Super excited to be here and get into this juicy conversation. My name is Steph Morris. I am a love, sex, and money coach, amongst many other things. That's the title, the role that I play these days in my business. So I work with women to really help them connect with their bodies, see the magic within their bodies, and really just shift their relationship to themselves so that they can shift their relationship with their partner or call in that dream partner that they so deeply desire, and just really embodying pleasure, balancing masculine and feminine energies. And I do a lot of work with sexuality and helping women release sexual shame and come into their full self, step into their full feminine power so that they can have that life where they have it all. I really believe that we can have it all. Doesn't mean we have to do it all. Doesn't mean we have to be it all at once. I think support is really important, but I think we put too many limitations on ourselves and we can really have everything we desire. The amazing intimate relationship, beautiful sex, lots of money, lots of orgasms, like the incredible bougie life and the spiritual and all of the things. Like that is my vision and what I'm here to help women do. And really because of my own journey is why I'm passionate about this. Like, I feel like everybody who is a coach or kind of has a business, it's a selfish journey that we go on and we have our own discovery and transformation. And then we're like, shit, I really want to share this with other women because it's so powerful and life-changing. And that's exactly what led me to this path of having this business. And on the thread of everything that you shared about, Elle, of like intimacy, relationship with ourselves, that was it for me. Like I was just a few years ago, just over 3 years ago, was like hustle, woman, hamster wheel, like late nights, early mornings, a lot of coffee, working out all the time, not really nourishing myself, eating out dinner loads, like just obsessed. Like I used to thrive on being online at like midnight, replying to messages and just working, thinking like, yeah, I was like, I'm living the life. Like, yes, like boss babe, we're doing it. And it was really destructive and really exhausting. And I experienced burnout a couple of times. The first time I was living in the US at the time with my partner, Jay, and I had a seizure basically, and it completely stopped me. Ended up in hospital. It was so scary because my whole body just shut down. And luckily Jay was there to literally catch me as I fell and like my body started convulsing. Otherwise I probably would have, it would have been bad. I was in the bathroom, would have smashed my head or something. Luckily he literally knight in shining armor saved me, but that was 24 hours in hospital and a $12,000 hospital bill and literally 6 weeks of thinking there was something really wrong with me before I could see a neurologist and find out that actually it wasn't an actual technical medical seizure and I had self-inflicted burnout. It was awful. Like I had such bad anxiety and that was really the start. It wasn't the thing that changed me though.
No.
No, I still fell back into my old habits after that, which is crazy. And I think it just comes down to that deeper inner work. So to kind of come back full circle, like that's where it began. And that was actually 5 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago. It was actually the relationship with my partner, who's now my husband, that really was the thing that I had to look in the mirror and go, okay, something's not working. Like I was very disconnected from myself, just hustling all the time. I actually would not let Jay physically touch me during the week. Like I was so into work and into my own bubble that if he like came up behind me whilst cooking dinner, I literally was like, don't touch me. I can't actually absorb your physical touch right now. And lacking intimacy, lacking libido, lacking sexual chemistry, all of the stuff, that was the thing. And there's so much more to that story, but that was the thing that made me go, I really want to change something because I'm not showing up in this relationship how I desire to show up, and this isn't becoming the relationship that either of us really want. So that was the catalyst, and a lot of busy women can relate to that, of like not having capacity to get intimate with their partner. But there's so much more to the story, but I'm gonna pause it there.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, I'm like writing notes. Yes, I can totally resonate with a lot of that. And I think, and it's definitely really common with that whole sort of like double busy life, that actually you're just seriously disconnected to yourself. And I think for me, I was really disconnected from myself, but that's why I led a double busy life. That's why I was like charging up and down the country doing my jobs and, you know, all the socials and everything, because I actually didn't want to sit with the feeling of like, I don't like myself and I'm not connected to myself at all. But just to go back then, which I think is going to be really good for people to listen to, and you've basically just told us that there's a real success story there. So you were in a place where you didn't feel, you know, you were struggling to be intimate with your partner, but you've now gone on to get married and you're really happy. And I think that bit's so key for people as advice. Like if you're in a relationship now, we can so quickly jump into it's not working and we've fallen out of love, when actually maybe we just need to reconnect back with ourselves before we can reconnect with somebody else.
Yeah 100%, because we can only go to the depth with another person that we've gone with ourselves first. And that's why there are a lot of people who are in sort of shallow surface level relationships, because they're too afraid to get really vulnerable with themselves and get really naked with themselves and their emotions and their own feelings and vulnerabilities and their own shadow. But that really is required to reconnect with the partner. So with being in a relationship with your partner, it's very common to go into that roommate phase where you feel disconnected, where you stop having sex, where you start to question, like, is this the right person? And it is such an isolating and scary place to be when you're starting to go, your mind is like going round in circles every day of like, is this the right person? Are we going to be together? What does this mean? Luckily, this is being talked about more now, but like 3, 4, 5 years ago, people weren't really talking about this. And I thought when I was going through it, this means my relationship's over. And I was like, I'm too embarrassed to like share this with anybody, because people are just going to say to me, it's not the right relationship, you have to break up. And I just don't think it's that simple. And I think one thread is just to know, if you're in that place, like the roommate phase, you're lacking that intimacy, you can totally get it back. And the way to getting it back is taking full personal responsibility for the part that you play in the relationship. Not saying that your partner isn't like doing their own, you know, thing, and there's always growth on both sides, but a lot of the times it is powerful for the woman to go first and to go on her own journey and be that invitation for her partner to then go on that journey with her. And it really does start with getting to know your own feelings, getting really vulnerable with yourself and finding out, who are you? Like, who actually are you underneath the busy woman, underneath the mum, underneath the employee or the business owner, whatever? Like, who are you underneath all of that? And what do you actually want for your life? You have to go there. You have to get to know your feelings, because if you don't know your own feelings, it's going to be really hard to communicate those with somebody else. So if you don't know how you feel, what you need, what you desire, what you want more of, what you want less of, it is near impossible to expect that you can effectively communicate that with your partner and have that open conversation. And so getting quiet, turning off all of the devices, and doing really powerful practices like embodiment, breath work, meditation, different things where you're really going deep into yourself and into your body, are super transformational to get to know yourself on such a deeper level. And it's not as simple as that. Like, obviously it's messy and it's scary and emotions and all of the things. It's like cans of worms are being opened. Like, that is kind of how it is. But the more that you go into that, the more that you acknowledge your shadows and the pain and the challenges, the more beauty and pleasure is on the other side as well.
Totally. That is just so the same with all communication, isn't it? Like, as soon as you actually have good communication with friends, families, partners, the other side of it is going to be much better. Like, it may be a different like scenario, but it's generally always going to be a lot better. And actually that communication piece is so hard. It's hard to communicate anyway about how we feel, but even more so specifically around intimacy and sex. Like, I mean, there will be some people who were fortunate to grow up talking about it probably quite openly. So they probably feel like
Those rare people.
those rare people, that it's easier for them now. But, it wasn't spoken about when I was growing up, not in our, not even really in our schools. Like, it's an awkward conversation to have.
Doesn't have to be though. It doesn't have to be, but
No.
it starts with, so the way I love to guide people, well, obviously I work with women one-on-one in coaching and in group programs, and that is a extremely powerful way to shatter the false narratives and beliefs that you have around sexuality and pleasure and self-pleasure and all the things, especially in a group setting as well. Like, wow, you are going to heal some like lifetimes of shame. But if you're not ready to like dive in working with another person, which is literally transformational, and that's what I did. I worked with a coach and it changed everything for me, hence how I got onto this journey. But journaling, so getting a journal, making sure that nobody's going to find it, like hide it, put it in your side drawer so that for sure like no one's going to read this. And I have loads of journal prompts that I share on social and blogs and stuff that you can start to ask yourself, like, how do I feel about myself sexually? Like, what did I learn about sexuality growing up? What did I learn about self-pleasure? What did I learn about women versus men self-pleasuring? All of these questions that you can start to ask yourself, which is really going to give you insight. And you want to follow the feelings. If we talk about, like, you're listening to this and we're talking about women self-pleasuring and women having amazing orgasms and loads of sex, notice how you feel in your body listening to that. Do you feel like, ooh, like, why is she talking about that? That's wrong. Is there like this little contraction that you can feel in your body? Or are you like, fuck yes? Like, do you feel expansive and open? Even this alone can give you insights into if there is any form of contraction or disgust or like any of those threads of feelings, that there's something there. And that's common for most women. Pretty much all women have some degree of internalized sexual shame just because of the society we grew up in. Like, even if you grew up in a really open household around talking about sex, there's still going to be some form from being intimate with partners, school experiences, all of the stuff. It all can create internalized shame, which creates further disconnection from ourselves. So to really get intimate with ourselves and develop that deeper relationship, we have to look at shame, and that's really scary, and that's really, really, really confronting.
Yeah, shame and guilt, they're the two things that come up a lot with disordered eating, low self-worth, body dysmorphia is huge, like low body image, and guilt and shame. It's so hard, but that is so connected, isn't it? The guilt and shame that we feel in our sexual experiences and relationships to how that can affect then our, like, the way we eat, the way we feel about ourselves, the way we look at ourselves in the mirror.
Yeah.
So if you think someone is like feeling shameful of their past, for example, maybe when they were in their younger 20s, and I have a lot of clients that I will go for their lifeline, and like, early 20s, there's a lot of sort of playing around, mucking around, whatever you want to call it. They find it really hard to talk about it, and they find it really shameful. And like, what do you think is like, why do you think that is? And what do you think is the best way for them to start to make peace with that period in their life? Or it doesn't even matter if you're doing that when you're older.
Well, I think the first question is, why do they feel like, what is the shame attached to? Is it the perception now that it's wrong for some reason, or is it somebody else's opinion? Like, what is the shame attached to? Was it something somebody said in those experiences? Was it the way that they felt afterwards? Or is it like shame looking back on it? Because that can be a common thing of like, well, people have said that, sleeping around with this many people is wrong. And then that kind of layers up on top of your experiences. But if you have a lot of shame, I mean, absolutely working with somebody like who is a coach or a therapist or a specialist in this area is going to be powerful, because it's going to be really, really hard to go into your own shame and to work through that when you don't have any expertise, knowledge, or experience on how to hold yourself through that, because shame is really scary. And if it's not handled in the right way, you could end up creating more shame on top of it, because the way that you were trying to explore it, and then you ended up shutting yourself down even more because something came up that you didn't know how to process. Starts with, though, starting to process your emotions and learning to meet your emotions with love and compassion. So to create transformation comes from love and compassion and acceptance. So getting to a place where you can accept, even if it's accepting a tiny part of yourself, accepting that past version that made those choices and had those experiences. Can you come into acceptance of that version of yourself? That is the first step that's required. If you can't, why not? What do you need to do to be able to accept that past version of you? So that's like the first key, but definitely reading up, getting help on this, because the more shame we have, the more disconnected we are, the more we're closed off to the beauty of life and the depth of experience that I think we can actually have as humans. But shame doesn't have to be something that we live with. It's a very complicated topic that I think everybody needs to dive into their shame and get curious. So again, starting with journaling, what do I feel shame? Do I feel shame about my body? Do I feel shame about parts of my body? Do I feel shame about self-pleasure or about the way I smell, the way I look? Get really clear on that first, because self-awareness is always the first step. You have to have self-awareness to be able to dive into it. So self-awareness and acceptance would be where I would start. And once you have that, really getting some support to work through it, because you don't have to live with shame. It can be healed, and it's so beautiful when it is.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think people underestimate the power of connection with everything, like the connection with yourself, connection with other people. And if you can get rid of that shame and that guilt, then you can feel more connected to yourself. And I do think that just opens doors and opportunities for people. And I think there's some people who are going to find that quite hard to understand. It's quite literal. People are going to think, oh, I don't really understand how me being more connected to myself is going to mean I can go on to do this and this and this. But I think you've got to really trust and give it a go. Like, if whatever you've been doing isn't working, try something new. And what you're talking about is going to be really different for people. Like, meditation, breath work, like some people can get into it quite easy. Some people it's a real, they can procrastinate on it like big time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially breath work. Well, all of those practices people have resistance to. Why do they have resistance? Because it is going into the unknown, and it is going to expose things to be felt that you probably have been suppressing and trying to numb yourself out of through other vices that we all have, right? So having resistance to those practices is totally normal. But the more that you do, if it's starting off with a few minutes a day, and this is why I literally recommend breathwork to every single person I ever meet, because if you want to start to meet your emotions with loving presence and with be able to heal them, breathwork is such a powerful tool. If you want to feel more confident, if you want to feel more secure, more connected, more clear, less overthinking and just that inner mean voice in your head, breathwork is the tool that will help you do that. It makes you feel like you're high every day. It activates your parasympathetic nervous system. Most people are breathing really shallow. Most people are in a constant state of stress and in that fight or flight. If you're in a state of fight or flight, forget growing and creating the life of your dreams from that place. You're in survival mode. So what happens in survival mode? Well, with food and all of that, like you want to try to lose weight and you're in a state of stress, or you want to try to heal your body or from bloating or whatever, you got to get into a calm state with your body. And oftentimes your body is actually holding on, right? It's holding on to things for protection. And it's the same thing with when you're starting to get into your emotions. Sometimes your body is holding on to these things and you need to just have that support and have that guidance in those practices to allow it to let it go once your body feels calm and feels safe. So that's why I recommend breath work and all of these practices to just get into that calm state. If you can live in that rest and digest state every single day, that alone will change so much for you. The way that you eat, the way that you digest your food will change, the way that you feel about yourself, everything changes.
Yeah, and I can totally resonate with that, because I've been a late starter to this breath work, and you've been encouraging me to do it. So I have been doing 5 or so minutes of breath work a day, and I've already noticed a huge difference.
Yay! What do you notice?
I feel calmer.
Yeah.
I feel calmer. I feel like I can process things slightly easier. But when I'm doing the breath work, I've noticed that I'm finding the breath work easier as well each time. So I did really struggle because I think I'm a very shallow breather, very like you say, living in a bit of a high cortisol state. But actually, I'm learning that it can actually be easy and pleasant to do breath work, even though initially it does feel quite hard.
Yeah.
But the benefits are definitely there because I've only been doing it for like, well, start of January, so like 11 days.
Yay. Well, that's amazing though, because that's all it takes is a few days of consistency to notice the shifts, like just feeling more calm, you feel more present, more connected, more grounded, like all of these beautiful things. You're activating your parasympathetic nervous system and you're feeling, I find I feel more confident. Like if I don't do breath work for a few days, my mind starts to go racing. I start to question myself. I start to have doubts. I start to like have all of these different like things creeping up that I don't find. And that's when our mind is overactive. Breathwork gets us into our body. It helps you feel like time is slowing down as well. Like you think you don't have enough time, right? People are always like, I don't have enough time. I don't have time to do breathwork, whatever. You want to slow down time, do breathwork. And you'll see afterwards, it's like, oh my gosh, everything's great. And another really powerful thing, it makes you less reactive, which a lot of us are very like emotionally charged and reactive, and we like blow up in certain situations. Well, breath work really helps with that as well. Like you can respond calmly and be like, okay, how do I want to respond to this versus just being in that reactive state? So many, like too many powerful things, but I recommend giving it a go for like, give it a go for a month. What have you got to lose? 5 minutes a day. You will guarantee feel a difference.
Yeah. All these things that we're kind of discussing are really hard to get going, but once you do, definitely worth it. So I spoke to a few people ahead of you coming on, and I had a few questions in. So one of the questions is actually like, what do you do if you just feel like, she said, I don't enjoy sex. And I said, well, you feel like you don't enjoy sex. So if you feel like you just don't enjoy sex.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So this is very, very common with women. Okay. Very common with women. So the best thing to do is to go on your own sexual exploration journey with yourself, because if you don't enjoy sex, a lot of sex in a heterosexual relationship is like missionary, like boring, kind of like, not saying it's boring, it's great, but it's kind of standardized based on what we have been taught and like what we've learned, right? There's a lot more to sex than that. And oftentimes, well, a few things. One, you probably don't know what you really like if you haven't really explored yourself. It can be, there are so many things as why you could find that you're not enjoying sex. You could be really disconnected from yourself. You could be too in your mind. If you're really in your head and you're thinking about like, oh, did I leave the chicken in? Am I going to make this next? Like, what's on my to-do list? It's going to be really hard to connect with the pleasure. The other thing that it can be is you can have, so like we just explored about earlier, if you had a lot of experiences when you were younger, like sleeping around or like just doing different things, you can have some internalized trauma and trapped emotions inside your vagina that are affecting your connection and actually stopping you from feeling pleasure. So a lot of people I work with have numbness or have pain. And just like we use breath work to allow ourselves to get into our emotional body to heal and release emotions that are trapped in our body and past trauma, it's the same thing internally. If you have not healed, and there's a process called yoni diarmoring, which you're probably going to be like, this sounds weird. There's a process called yoni diarmoring where you're applying pressure points to actually release and allow the muscles internally to let go. And through that process, you can start to access more sensation and you can start to feel more and just feel more turn on, more lubrication, more pleasure. Just like if you've ever had a cramp in your calf or in your shoulder, it's like really tight and really painful, and you just like iron it out, like give it a little massage, you get a deep tissue massage, and then it's like, oh my gosh, that relief, it feels so much better. Well, it's the same thing internally. There are muscles, there are points inside that could have had a lot of trapped emotions within. So that's the second thing. But really exploring yourself, like if I hadn't done this, my sex with my husband would not be what it is now. Because if you think you're going to go into a relationship with your partner, and look, some people are like this, but most people are not. If you're going to go into a relationship and be like, let's try this, I want to try this, let's do that, I want to do all this, like if you haven't gone there with yourself, that is really scary and really vulnerable. So really going on a journey to heal that emotional internal emotions, release them, explore yourself, because the more you want to access more pleasure, you have to go into the pain. So you want more pleasure, you want more highs, then it means you have to get comfortable with the lows, and you have to get comfortable with everything that comes with it. So literally, I could go on and on about this. What are you thinking about this? But it's really doesn't have to be that way. What do you say?
Yeah. No, my mind's just going over and over it all. And I think, like, from what you said, and I think it's so true, like, actually, we can have past trauma with sex, even if we didn't realize it was trauma. Like, just having awkward sex or difficult sex that is, you know, fully consented and you wanted it, can still be traumatic. Yeah. And actually what you were saying there about, like, kind of like your womb shuts down, so I think you go numb. That word numb, I was like, that is a descriptive word that so many people use with their, like, when they're having sex and they just can't seem to get into it.
Yeah, very, very common. So when we think of trauma, we typically think of like people who've experienced severe traumatic situations, but there's different forms of trauma, and trauma can be created internally. If you've had a traumatic birth, like a really crazy birth, you can have internalized trauma. If you have been to get your pap smear and it was like white, like that can create internalized trauma that your womb, your cervix actually holds onto. It needs to be released. If you have ever said yes, like consented, yet internally you kind of knew you weren't feeling it, and you were like, oh, I'm just kind of doing this, that creates trauma, that creates trapped emotion. Or if you've like really not been into it, be like, well, I'm not feeling this, but we'll just do it anyway. All of these experiences, which I feel like every woman has done at some point, this creates trauma, and this creates a further disconnection inside of ourselves. And it really cuts us off from the full experience of what sex can be. Sex is not for our partner. Sex is not for the other person or for a man. And unfortunately, we're not taught about women's pleasure. It's such a huge part of our life. So going on your own pleasure journey, and pleasure starts in a non-sexual way, going into your emotions and your feelings, starting to heal yourself that way. Make sure you're getting into your body, do all of this healing. Your experience with sex will completely transform. That's just the you part. Once you're going on that journey, then there are things that you can do to deepen that intimacy and connection with your partner. And if you have a deeper emotional connection, then your sexual connection is going to be through the roof. But you can't just like skip over and be like, we're going to have wild, amazing, pleasurable sex if you're not emotionally connecting with that person on a really deep level first, because it goes emotional connection, sensual connection, and then a sexual connection. But oftentimes we're like, let's get into it, let's get sexually connected. But for a woman, it's like, it takes women between 20 and 40 minutes to get turned on, to get warmed up, to really open, for their bodies to open up, to be ready for sex. Most people are not giving themselves, and their partners don't have the awareness to give them that time to really get into it. If it's like a quick 2-minute, 5-minute jumping,
yeah,
you're not going to be like, it's not that easy, like a man can just get right into it. It's not the same for us. It really is a process. And so shifting our relationship with sex is really powerful too. But it all, sex aside, it starts with the emotional connection to yourself and to your partner. And the byproduct is wild pleasure. And I just want all women to experience the pleasure that is accessible into their body. Like, we are so powerful. We have so much power and just wisdom and magic within our bodies that we get to go on this journey to explore it, and it changes everything. And it's not just about sex. There's so much more to it than that. But the most powerful woman is a woman who is fully embodied in her sexual energy and her sexual power, who has released all of that shame, who is her full self, and she's owning herself. And it's like, wow, she's like magnetic, she's powerful. Yeah, she's in her full sexual energy. She's unlocked that part of herself and healed the rest. So many of us don't get to that point, right? And so you want to be the most powerful woman who creates this incredible life, then exploring yourself sexually is a part. Like, it's a part of us as human beings. We all do it. We're all having sex. It creates life. Like we wouldn't all be here without it. And so there's just more to it than what we were taught about it, or not taught in most cases. And it really is such a powerful aspect of life to explore and unlock.
It is, like, it is actually so important, but it's, it's one of the probably most natural, one of the most natural things in the world, along with, childbirth and things like that. So why is it so unnatural to talk about? Why is it so so awkward and so difficult? But yeah, I think, like, you've touched on a couple of things, and I think that resonates with so many people. That sort of like having sex because you think you should, or you just want to, to make sure that the other person's okay, but actually you're really not into it, and like creating that sort of like, that piece of trauma that comes with that. But also just that, like, that is also just adding fuel to your low self-worth, isn't it? Like, that's really just sort of saying, yeah, this is, you don't even want to be doing it, but you're doing it anyway because you've got such low self-worth. And so that's really sort of adding to those thoughts and feelings.
It creates a further disconnection with yourself and distrust, because if you have even a slight sense of not into it, it kind of feels like a no, but you say yes, it's like you're like chipping off a little chip from the block of trust, versus if you feel like it's not really I'm not ready yet, or it's a no, and you speak that, it's like you're adding a coin to the piggy bank of self-trust, because you're like, I trust that when I feel something, I share it, and I don't go against how I feel and what I need and desire. So these things are really important. And if you're with a loving partner, and this conversation can start before you get into the bedroom, but be like, do I have permission to say no if it doesn't feel like a yes for me? If you're with a loving partner, they're going to be like, of course, I would hope. If they're like, fuck no, maybe you need to evaluate like the quality of the partner that you're with. But your partner hopefully would be absolutely like shocked to hear that you are like betraying yourself and your own body signals to do something to please them. Most partners would not want that, and that is the way it needs to go. But we feel like we have this duty to like please them. Well, it's not really the way. So conversation, but how do you have that conversation? Well, you have to know how you feel, and you have to have the skills and the confidence to open that conversation with your partner, and doing that before the intimate setting is ideal. But it all comes down to communication and intimacy, and it starts with that intimacy with ourselves.
Yeah, totally. And I think it also comes down to the partner, female or male, actually not taking that as a personal attack, not taking that as rejection. And I was reading something the other day about like how in a heterosexual relationship, if the female says no and the male he sees it as rejection, it can bring him back to like inner child rejection from parents or grandparents or whatever. And it's so triggering. So like their reaction might seem really sort of like a bit, pig-headed, like, oh, for God, it's just like, you can't take that so personally, but actually it's a deep, dark feeling within them that is actually like it's so much more meaning than just what is going on there in that moment.
Yeah. Hence why it's important that each partner in a relationship, regardless of gender, is doing their own healing work, because that it's not fair to have, if you're worried that your partner is going to get triggered by their inner child wounds, that's not your responsibility. It's on your partner to heal that. We've all got healing to do. We've all got inner child healing to do.
Yes.
to go there, but that's each individual's responsibility to do that. So especially if you're in any relationship with another person, go first with that healing, and you'll find that your partner will either be inspired by that and want to match that growth and want to go on that journey with you and be like, okay, yes. And there's a little time delay here. It's not like you're like, I'm going on this journey of growth and discovering who I am. And then like next week, your partner's like, I'm coming with you. How are we going to do this? Like, it can be a bit of a delay of months, maybe even a year.
It is, yeah.
But it can happen, right? It can happen that eventually your partner is like, wow, this is so cool to see you growing. And if they're not going to step up to that, then sometimes, unfortunately, that's when you're growing in different directions. But as humans, it's essential that we're growing. Trees are always growing. Like, the grass is always growing. If a tree isn't growing, it's dead. It's tree wood. It's no longer a living, useful tree. Same thing with humans, but somewhere along the way, it's like we forgot that growth was a really important part of being a human. And a lot of people are stuck where they were 20 years ago. It's not supposed to be that way. We're supposed to be evolving and growing. And how cool if you can be with a partner where you're growing together and you're growing into the next version of yourself, but you're still in the relationship. There's nothing more rewarding and more fulfilling. And it's such a beautiful journey. But go first. If you're listening to this podcast, be the one to go first. Don't expect your partner, I want them to grow first and I want to follow them. Well, that's your ego talking. Something to look at there. I get it. I get it. It would be great. Like, I spent many years wishing for that too. And it led me to frustration and resentment that I had to work through. Resentment towards my partner, but it was really a me thing. So I had to work through that and be like, let's put the ego aside. I'll go first. And he did follow. And yes, now we're growing together, but there was a big time delay. You got to have patience.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm going through that. Like, I'm really spiritual, and my partner, it isn't really. So I'm still waiting for this time delay, please. I'm still waiting for him to follow me. I've kind of gone off, but a little while ago, like, I was really trying to get him into it, and then I was like, just give up. You do you, off you go. And when he sees the results, and if it resonates with him, he'll follow. So yeah, so watch this space. I'll let you know when he follows.
Yes. Well, the more that you try and push something on your partner, especially if they're a man, the more they're going to reject it and the more frustrated you're going to be. So that's an element of control. Like, I'm trying to control them to get into it now in the way that I want them. Been there, done that, totally get it. Very common for women to do. But the more, look, here's a great little way. You can buy a book for them and you can be like, I've bought you a gift, but you're not saying you have to read this book. I bought Jay a book. This is an incredible book. It's by David Dida, who is like the art of like sexual yogic intimacy. He is amazing. Okay, so it's called The Way of the Superior Man. The woman's book is called Dear Lover. Incredible. I bought this book for Jay in 2020 when I was like really going on this journey and getting into David Dida and John Wineland and all these people, which recommend that you look up. Some of my mentors. Anyway, he's gone through the book. Like, he read the synopsis of the book maybe 2 years ago, and he was like, got it. I get it. I read the overview. I was like, okay. So I left it. He is now reading this book. Okay. So it's 2023. So I got this book over 3 years ago. He's now reading it. He's studying it like the Bible. He's like making notes. He's like, this is the best book I have ever read in my entire life. It's hands down the best book. And it's all about him embodying the masculine. It's really about like the masculine energy and how they can support the feminine. So really, really powerful book for masculine partners to read. But there we go. 3 years it took me. And I was insistent on him reading that book at the time. He wasn't ready for it. Now he is. And side note to this, like, I had a little bit of I was telling you earlier, I had a meltdown this morning, and he was practicing what he read in the book to support me, which is the masculine always, typically men want to problem solve. They're like, solution, let me do it. Oftentimes the feminine don't want that. We just want to be held and supported. So as I was having my meltdown this morning and I was crying, he just was like, presence, grounded present, just hugging me until it was time. Like, it was such a different energy that he was in. And this was he literally was like, I was practicing what I've been reading in the book. I was like, yes.
I love that.
And that's what it's about. So everybody go, if you're with a masculine partner, go get them that book, put it on a side table and expect it could be 3 years before they read it.
Yeah, I'll be waiting for like 10, but that's fine. I've got time. No, definitely. That is so helpful. That's really, and it's just really good insight for people to see as well, that like, you do what you do, but things still aren't perfect for you and Jay. And, you're still always on your journey, even though you work in what you do and you're so good at it. But like, I think it's just really good. And I'm kind of like the same, like, I've still got things around my body and food. and I'm always growing with it. But like, if you are someone that is struggling with intimacy, sex, relationships, whatever it is, like, you can get to where you've got to. There's no reason why not.
Totally. And just like with this conversation of like intimacy, relationship with your partner, I see it the same way that I see food, which was really helpful for me with, I used to be a perpetual dieter and all of that, yo-yo, all of those sorts of things. And when I had the mindset shift of like, I'm just going to shift my lifestyle to like have a healthy lifestyle where I'm in balance and nourish myself, and versus having this like, I have to do everything in 3 months and like smash gym workouts and eat healthy for 3 months so that I have my best body. I was like, I'm just gonna just do me and shift on being this way consistently for the rest of my life. It's the same thing, and everything changed for me with my relationship with my body, having that shift. It's the same thing with relationship with your partner. If you're committed to be with your partner for life, you're committed to be with yourself for life. Don't try and rush into these quick fix things. See it as it's a journey, and you're going to grow and you're going to evolve. And as you go to new levels, there are new challenges that come up, or the same problem, but in a different way. And that is part of being a human. So the more that you can embrace that and adopt that and be like, I'm just going to open my arms to growth and to challenges that are going to come up and have fun with it, then it becomes easier versus like, I have to fix this. I have to fix my relationship. I have to fix my body. I have to fix whatever it is in a short period of time. That's just a recipe for disaster ultimately. So when you shift the mindset of the long-term game in whatever area of life, it's not about being perfect. Like, I'm always having to remind myself, coming back to like practicing what I preach. But the thing to remember is the people that are doing this work, like me doing this work, you doing that work, it's because we have been trying to learn that lesson, and we've gone on our own journey in that area in such a deep way. So that means that we have a lot of old programming of being the opposite, right? Like, there is so much old programming that is always having to be undone. So it's not about being perfect. I still have challenges. I still have meltdowns. Me and Jay still get into arguments and go through periods where we don't have sex because there's stress or we're busy or whatever. That's part of life. It's not about being the perfect human forever. And how boring would that be, honestly? If it was just all up and all highs, we wouldn't enjoy it. We would take it for granted and we'd be like, this is so boring. So just remember that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And also, like, with that bit that you just said there, like, sometimes you're not having sex. Like, who even said that having lots of sex was supposed to be what should happen anyway? Like,
oh my God.
It's
what the question to ask yourself is, what is a healthy sex life look like to me? And ask your partner the same question. How often, like, what is a successful sex life? For some people, it's once a week. For some people, it's once every 2 weeks. For some people, they're like, yes, it's much more about the quality of that interaction. So let's have like an hour or two together every 2 weeks. And that is perfect because it fills us up. For some people, they want to be having it every day. Great. But that's not realistic for everybody with businesses and with kids and like getting all of those things in. So, and you go through seasons, right? Like, if you've ever traveled or gone on vacation, probably having a lot more sex during that time when you're like stress-free and in a different environment, and bring that into your relationship. How can you create a stress-free new variety in your relationship? And that's gonna bring it back. But totally, like, figure out for you what, like, how much you want, how much your partner wants, get on the same page with that to make sure that you're sexually matched, because otherwise that can create issues if you have mismatched sexual desires. And that is all you need. Don't be comparing, like, Sally over here is telling me she's having sex 3 times a day. Like, yes, good for her.
How many times will people go home and be like, oh, so-and-so's doing it this much, why are we not doing it this much? There's something wrong with us. Oh, absolutely. That will be a big conversation. I can imagine, though, doing everything that we've just spoken about will really, really help relationships with general communication as well. Because if you can actually, like, have these awkward conversations about sex and the rest of it, then going on to talk about money or like to-do lists probably feel a lot easier as well.
Which sex doesn't have to be an awkward conversation. Why do you feel like it's awkward? It's because of societal conditioning, religion, silence, like when something isn't talked about, oftentimes that can create more shame and like shit for us with our relationship to that thing, right? But I mean, for me, it was like a silence conversation. It wasn't really talked about. It was, don't have sex because you'll get pregnant and your life will be over. Well, what kind of, and I literally every year would be like, thank God I'm not pregnant. Even when I wasn't having sex, like never had sex in my life. I was like, thank God, haven't had sex. I'm not pregnant. My life isn't over. Like that was my concern. So what do you think happens when you get older? That if you haven't worked through that, that belief is still ruling your life. So you're going to avoid sex because internally you believe sex equals pregnant equals life over at like 25 years old, because you're still operating in that 14-year-old belief. So it's just wild. But yeah, the more like, okay, here's the thing. And this is why I'm so passionate about this topic. If you want to transform every area of your life, if you want to radically transform the relationship with yourself, explore yourself sexually. Everything, your relationship to food will change. The relationship to your body will dramatically change. Like it is just wild the power that there is with this. And this is what I love to share about and talk about. Your relationship to pleasure will change. Your relationship to money will change. Everything is going to change when you explore this really large part of yourself and of your life. And once you can speak openly about orgasms and sex and pleasure and dildos and all of that stuff, yeah, it's like, okay, I can meet my emotions now because I've gone there in that way. We can talk about money. We can have the hard conversations because you are going to have gone to the depths of yourself and back. You are going to be having more pleasure than you've ever had before. And like everything else just becomes a little bit more effortless when you go on that really deep journey, and conversations don't have to be difficult anymore. Like there is literally no conversation that I could have that I wouldn't find like, I love communication. I love having conversations about all of the things clearly that people don't usually talk about. Why? Because literally 4 years ago, you couldn't have paid me to have this conversation. I would have like, honestly, part of me would have died a little bit and been like, this is wrong. So if I can be here and now I literally talk about sex and money and pleasure, like on the internet and on podcasts, if I can transform that way, like I just wish there was a video or something that people could see of who I used to be. Like it's so possible. And it doesn't mean, that you're going to have sex every day and just be obsessed with sex. It does not mean that. It just means you're going to become more of yourself. It means you're going to enjoy your life more. It means you're going to feel more ease, and you're just going to be like, wow, my life is freaking amazing. And so everything becomes a little bit easier when you operate in that way, and you can have conversations in an effective way. Every relationship in your life is going to shift dramatically. You're going to get more of what you want because you can communicate efficiently what you want, what you need, what you desire to every person you meet, whether that's your partner, your kids, your parents, your job, your boss, your clients, your accountant, whatever it is. If you can communicate efficiently, everything is just a little bit easier.
Amazing. I feel motivated. I'm gonna go pleasure myself.
Yes.
No, I'm gonna go and do the kids' bedtime, bath time, and dinner.
Sexy.
Thank you so much, Steph. This has been absolutely amazing. So where can listeners find you?
Find me on basically all the channels. My handle is I am Steph Morris on Instagram. I'm mainly on Instagram. I'm also on TikTok, on YouTube, Pinterest. My website is stephmorris.co. So yeah, come send me a message on Instagram. Tell me what you loved about this conversation, what you learned, what you're going to implement. Would love to carry on this conversation with you because clearly I can talk about it all day.
Oh, thank you so much. Have a fabulous day.
Thank you.
Bye.